What if we say a grand African empire or a United States of Africa is in the making? Back in 1884, Europe drew lines across Africa, not to unite it, but to divide, conquer, and extract. The Berlin Conference carved borders that still bleed Africa today. A continent rich in everything, from Mali's gold to Ghana's factories, from Niger's uranium to Nigeria's ports, remains shackled by lines we never chose. But what if those borders vanished? IBRAHIM Traore dared to ask that question. Now Ghana's new president John Mahama just answered it with action. He is not just talking about unity, he is ordering it. And what he has already put in motion is rattling the White House and panicking European capitals. But what is he doing that will change the very shape of Africa the West knows? In this video, let's find out. At first, Mahama's return to power was seen as just another political reshuffle, but he wasted no time flipping the narrative. Standing shoulder to shoulder with Traore during a powerful joint appearance, Mahama announced two seismic policies that could alter Africa's future forever. First, he would dismantle the artificial colonial-era borders that keep African nations divided. And second, he would permanently end the export of raw materials to Western markets. This is not symbolic, it's strategic. For centuries, Africa has been the world's raw material supplier. Gold from Ghana, oil from Nigeria, cobalt from the Congo, cocoa from Ivory Coast. But while the world grew rich, Africa was left economically paralyzed, forced to buy back its own resources as overpriced finished goods. This has been the foundation of global inequality, and Mahama is saying, enough. Factories must be built in Africa. Raw materials must be processed in Africa. Jobs must be created in Africa. The continent should no longer beg for aid while sitting on $100 trillion worth of natural wealth, with each country like Congo holding resources worth $24 trillion. This isn't some vague declaration with no follow-through. President John Dramani Mahama isn't stopping at speeches or symbolism. He is laying down infrastructure, institutions, and policy blueprints that are reshaping Ghana's future and setting the stage for a continent-wide economic rebellion. The first and most urgent project underway is the removal of colonial trade barriers between Ghana and its immediate African neighbors. The Mahama administration has already begun scrapping customs fees and dismantling cross-border tariffs that previously made it more expensive to trade with Burkina Faso than with Europe. That single move sent a bold message that Ghana was no longer prioritizing European trade. It's turning toward Africa. To support this shift, Mahama has launched a new trade facilitation task force, mandated to fast-track regional agreements on goods, services, and worker mobility. The focus? Fewer borders. More business. His government is drafting a special trade status for West African states, giving them access to Ghanaian markets without visa restrictions or redundant paperwork. In a continent where a Kenyan passport gets you into fewer African countries than a French one, this is revolutionary. But it doesn't stop at policy. Mahama is building the roads, literally. Ghana is now committing funds toward modernizing the Accra-Ouagadougou corridor, a route that has historically been a bottleneck for trade. Border delays, poor road quality, and complex paperwork have long made it nearly impossible for trucks carrying goods to move smoothly between the two capitals. That changes now. The plan includes paved highways, one-stop customs stations, and joint cargo clearance operations, where Burkinabe and Ghanaian officials share offices, not checkpoints. Alongside these roadworks is a massive rail revival project. Mahama has signed off on a feasibility study for a transnational rail system linking Ghana's industrial zones with Burkina Faso's agricultural heartlands. If completed, this line will serve not just these two countries, but Mali and Niger as well, potentially transforming the entire Sahel into a connected, land-powered trade engine. This bizarre reality exists because the continent's aviation infrastructure remains largely fragmented, underdeveloped, and heavily influenced by colonial-era trade patterns. For instance, If someone in Freetown, Sierra Leone, wants to travel to Nairobi, Kenya, they might not find a direct flight. Instead, they are often routed through Brussels or Paris, flying thousands of kilometers north to Europe before turning back south to reach their destination, all within the same continent. This isn't just an occasional inconvenience. It's the norm for many African routes. Airlines often lack the permissions or partnerships to fly across multiple African countries due to restrictive bilateral air service agreements that haven't evolved with the times. Unlike Europe, which enjoys an open skies framework through the EU, or Asia, where regional integration is far more advanced, Africa's airspace is locked down by outdated policies and nationalist airline protectionism. This is further worsened by infrastructure gaps and the colonial hub-and-spoke model that many airlines still operate under. Instead of building intra-African connectivity, airlines focus on routes to Europe and the Middle East, where demand is higher and profitability is more predictable. In some extreme cases, like traveling from Lomé, Togo, to Bujumbura, Burundi, passengers might go through Paris and Nairobi, adding days to their journey and hundreds of dollars in extra costs. This is exactly why Ghanaian President John Mahama's proposal for direct flights between African cities is so revolutionary. He is not just calling for economic unity in theory. He is addressing the physical, logistical disconnect that has kept African nations reliant on Europe to move between themselves. Mahama's vision of open skies for Africa is about making sure that a student, trader, or tourist can move from East to West Africa without needing a stamp from Paris or a layover in Dubai. By doing so, he is not just proposing a policy. He is reclaiming Africa's right to connect with itself without colonial intermediaries. Beyond transport, Mahama is making bold investments in digital infrastructure and energy connectivity. His plan is to harmonize internet standards, streamline payment systems, and develop cross-border electricity agreements so Ghana's surplus power can light up border regions in Burkina Faso and eventually vice versa. The dream is to make an Africa that isn't just united politically, but plugged into the same grid, riding the same rails, and speaking the same economic language. And then there's agriculture. One of Mahama's most concrete actions is the announcement of a new Pan-African agricultural partnership, starting with Burkina Faso and Ghana. Ghana will supply seed technology, food processing tools, and storage infrastructure, while Burkina Faso offers land, manpower, and agricultural scale. Together, the nations plan to develop shared food reserves, cooperative export hubs, and a fertilizer production pipeline independent of Western suppliers. Mahama is also working on value chains, not just raw materials. His government has already begun offering tax holidays to local entrepreneurs building cocoa processing plants. Ghana's chocolate industry, long stifled by foreign interests, is getting a shot of adrenaline. The goal is to stop shipping cocoa to Europe to buy back luxury sweets. Ghana wants to become a global chocolate capital from bean to bar and provide it to Africa, not Europe. Before we continue further, tell us, are you enjoying the video? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black Africa. Let's continue now. All these aren't theoretical plans. They are locked in through a memorandum of understanding signed between Ghanaian and Burkinabe ministries, many of which were made public just days after Traore's surprise visit to Accra. All this is unfolding while Western ambassadors, think tanks, and media outlets try to figure out how a so-called stable ally like Ghana suddenly turned the tables. As the dust settles from Mahama's political thunderclap and Traore's unapologetic alliance-building tour, one question is echoing in boardrooms from Abuja to Addis Ababa, and more nervously, in foreign embassies from Washington to Brussels. Who's next to join the rebellion? Because make no mistake, this isn't just a Burkina Faso-Ghana friendship pact. This is the opening phase of a continental shift, and leaders across Africa are paying attention, silently recalculating their positions, watching the reactions from the West, and asking themselves a dangerous but necessary question. What if we stop waiting for Europe and start building with each other? Let's start with the obvious. Mali and Niger are already in. They have joined Traore in forming a bold new confederation of Sahel states, a military and economic alliance with anti-imperialist DNA baked into its constitution. These nations are already cutting ties with France, ejecting military bases, and publicly supporting the idea of African autonomy over foreign debt, currency, and infrastructure. Now, with Ghana's entrance into the ideological camp, that Sahelian confederation may no longer be a regional anomaly. It's evolving into a pan-African engine. Guinea is another high-probability candidate. Led by transitional President Mamadi Doumbouya, Guinea has echoed similar language in recent years: anti-colonial rhetoric, skepticism toward the CFA franc, and calls for African solutions to African problems. In fact, Doumbouya was one of the few heads of state to immediately express support for Traore after Burkina Faso's revolutionary pivot. The groundwork for Guinea to step in alongside Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, and now Ghana is already laid. Togo and Benin, long seen as quiet, stable client states, are now caught between two conflicting pressures: loyalty to France and economic desperation. But after seeing Mahama's economic case laid bare, a $100 trillion intra-African market, the elimination of foreign dependency, and industrial jobs replacing aid programs, some of their leaders are reportedly warming to the idea of joining the trade realignment. Backroom meetings between Ghanaian diplomats and Togolese officials are rumored to have occurred in the days following Mahama's announcement. Senegal, now with the surprise election of anti-establishment figure Bassirou Diomaye Faye, adds another wildcard to the mix. Faye has already spoken about reclaiming Senegal's sovereignty and reassessing economic ties to the West. If he joins the movement and aligns with Ghana and Burkina Faso, it would be a death blow to France's remaining influence in West Africa. Suddenly, all of Francophone West Africa would be under a new leadership philosophy, one of African first, anti-colonial, economic independence. But what about the rest of the continent? Well, in East Africa, whispers are already growing louder. Tanzania's President Samia Suluhu Hassan, while careful with her diplomatic words, has emphasized local manufacturing, internal trade, and regional integration. Her administration is quietly pursuing partnerships with Zambia and the DRC to strengthen mineral processing capabilities within Africa, echoing Mahama's declaration to stop exporting raw materials. Her moves may be cautious, but she is watching. Then, there is South Africa, the economic heavyweight of the continent. Publicly, its ANC-led government remains committed to the African Union's broader agenda. But internally, analysts in Pretoria are re-evaluating trade policy amid growing resentment over how the West imposes trade sanctions, sets resource prices, and manipulates development aid. Mahama's aggressive model may seem extreme to them for now, but if the Confederation model leads to real economic results, even South Africa may not want to be left behind. And in Central Africa, the Democratic Republic of Congo holds the key. With cobalt, copper, and untapped hydro potential, it could be the battery and power engine of New Africa. President Félix Tshisekedi, faced with the brutal reality of Congo's wealth bleeding to foreign-owned mines and tax havens, now faces a choice to either remain the world's resource colony or join a pan-African coalition determined to process, produce, and profit domestically. Meanwhile, on the global stage, Western leaders are scrambling. The White House has quietly commissioned a task force on West African instability, though internal sources admit the real concern isn't insurgency. It's economic defection. Brussels has already threatened to suspend trade deals with countries that undermine democratic norms, an excuse often used for refusing to let Western companies dominate their economies. But the message from Traore, Mahama, and the rising African alliance is clear. They have declared they are not afraid of threats, but of staying poor forever. Now, while African leaders like Traore and Mahama publicly shake hands and break borders, the corridors of power in Washington, Paris, and Brussels are in crisis mode. Official statements may use phrases like monitoring the situation or supporting democratic norms, But classified memos and leaked cables tell a different story. At the White House, national security advisors are now tracking African unity talks as a strategic threat to U.S. economic interests. The fear is that a borderless African trade bloc would shut out Western companies, demand new terms, and worse, set its own prices on uranium, cobalt, cocoa, and rare earths. In Brussels, EU officials are considering emergency reviews of trade privileges for African nations aligning with the Traore-Mahama axis. Diplomatic threats are being whispered: frozen aid, suspended trade deals, revoked visas. But the problem is that these old tools don't work anymore, not when countries are linking up to create independence from the IMF and World Bank itself. Inside the IMF, quiet warnings are emerging about a coordinated African walkout from debt agreements, especially as countries propose an African central bank and begin exploring resource-backed currencies independent of the dollar and euro. Furthermore, there are even plans that Africa should price on its resources. For over a century, Africa has mined the gold but never set its price. It pumped the oil, dug the cobalt, harvested the cocoa, and still, the price tags were decided in London, Paris, New York. But that's changing. With Mahama, Traore, and their allies now forming a united front, there is growing momentum to form a Pan-African Commodities Council, a body that would set floor prices for Africa's most valuable exports. Think of it as an OPEC for everything Africa produces. The plan is to stop selling uranium at giveaway rates. No more Western traders controlling cocoa futures while African farmers starve. No more cobalt feeding electric car giants while Congo's children dig with bare hands. Instead, Africa wants to say, if you want it, you pay us fairly, or we don't ship it at all. This terrifies Wall Street and rattles Brussels because if Africa starts controlling supply and setting prices, it shatters the exploitative foundations that built modern Western economies. It forces global industries to finally treat Africa as a negotiating partner, not a dumping ground or minefield. Now, the era of African leaders begging for loans, waiting on aid, or accepting crumbs from global tables is dying. In its place, a new generation of leaders, led by Traore, Mahama, Doumbouya, and others, is emerging with a new system of no more borders, no more charity, and no more silence. Africa is no longer asking to be part of the system. Africa is building its own. And this time, the rest of the world is the one watching and panicking. What do you think? Should other African countries join Ibrahim Traore and John Mahama in making Africa borderless? Isn't it true that it's better for African countries to enrich the continent than the West? In the comment section below, share your thoughts on what blocks African leaders from working for African prosperity and growth, prioritizing only Western interests. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We bring videos on Black Africa, its history, rich arts and culture, and things the world should know about. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.